Our tampered government. I truly love the U.S. government, said nobody ever, especially not in recent history. Today we riot and protest our government for worsening our lives and causing disruption. As seen in the preamble to the U.S. Constitution, our government is supposed to be a government that establishes justice, ensures domestic tranquility, provides for the common defense, promotes the general welfare, and secures the blessing of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Every interest was for the people and their security. Now, through corruption and poor decisions, we have created a broken system that is no longer a government for the people, but instead for profit and power. No longer does our government see us as people. Now we are expendables, dollar signs waiting for Uncle Sam's taking. It is time for our government to return to its former ways within the original Constitution. One of the first flaws in our process is our overpowered federal government. We are a nation of over 300 million people in 50 states, very different and unique from one another. But for some reason, we are all regulated by the same authority. Something doesn't add up. If we looked at the United States in terms of a business, it would be like the whole corporation of Amazon working under one roof. However, CEO of Amazon Jeff Bezos is smarter than that. He divided his business empire into several different distribution centers and warehouses all across the nation, all of which operate independently and uniquely from each other. An immensely populated state like California should be run completely differently than the desolate state of North Dakota. However, that is not the case. They are excessively controlled by the same federal government for two major reasons: taxation and power. Our government does not have to be some overarching fear that controls us all. We can still be a united nation without listening to the same ruler. This quote from Jongmin Shan's article further explains the benefits of a localized government. It has long been asserted that a decentralized system works better than a single centralized government, because the decentralized system works closer to its citizens and responds to them more efficiently. A federal government is necessary but is not needed in our everyday lives. Things like the money supply and military need to be controlled by a federal government. Things like taxes, civil laws, marriage requirements, business regulation, and age requirements, however, do not need federal government. Majority of the legislative power is being held and abused by the federal government. It is time for that power to be localized so it can be used more efficiently and effectively. Along with their overpossession of power, the central government uses this power at its own discretion. The common solution to this issue would be more transparency. Theoretically, increased media coverage of government activity would solve the problem. However, transparency comes with its own issues as well. The solution is to find balance between discretion and transparency. This article, written by Kirby Goidel, states, closed-door meetings and backroom deals have deservedly drawn the condemnation and ire of political journalists and reformers, but openness and transparency exert their own cost. Conversations are less honest and less productive when aspiring politicians know that every utterance can potentially be used as a 30-second ad in their next campaign. As we can see, too much transparency without independent action leads to the less productivity and higher risk of ridicule. Think of a broadcasted debate between two politicians of different parties. Almost never is there harmony. Both stick to their own opinions and no agreements are hardly ever seen. On the other side of the spectrum, we have too much independent action without transparency. This leads to decisions made without the approval of the public. Over-independent action combined with the overpossession of power is a recipe for disaster. However, a limited government, like mentioned in the previous paragraph, combined with a perfect balance of discretion and transparency is a recipe for prosperity. Calling our government a broken system isn't just an outright claim. It truly is divided. Our political system is broken into two parties, the members of which absolutely despise each other. This article states, the percentage of Americans with favorable opinions of both parties is now the lowest it has been since the ANES began asking this question in 1978. We hate the other side because our politicians are telling us to. They are influencing our thoughts and opinions in order to secure our vote. But just like the old phrase goes, don't hate the player, hate the game. These politicians have no choice but to play like this. It is simply red versus blue. To politicians, the mission is to get the voters on the side or risk losing voters to the other side. This winner takes all design only leads to division, corruption, and straight up lies. We can see evidence of this from the quote mentioned above: a steady downward trend of American unity and a steady upward trend of resentment between our people. Although these politicians may lie to us, the numbers do not. Competition is great to inspire new thoughts and ideas, but a never-ending, bitter competition between two sides isn't inspiring any positive change. Our political system does not need to be one side versus the other. Originally, it was made to be complete opposite, but we will get to that later. In order for a politician to be successful in our current system, one must affiliate with one of the two predominant parties. Choose a third or independent party, and the politician's chances of winning any sort of office near zero. Essentially, we have limited the government to two conflicting opinions. A politician aligns with Democrat or Republican for the sake of the votes. But there's a new solution that changes the way we vote. It encourages agreeing opinions amongst politicians and discourages negative partisanship. It is called ranked choice voting. Will Brederman explains it further in this article. Some supporters have even suggested it also can reduce political polarization and encourage politicians to adopt centrist stances as they look to become the second choice of many voters, rather than merely the first choice of an energized minority. The saying is typically majority rules, but when we elect officials, it's plurality rules. That means a candidate doesn't need more than 50% of the votes, he or she just needs more than their opponent. The way ranked choice voting works is simple. Instead of voters picking just their first choice, they rank their picks in order from most favorable to least. That means if a candidate doesn't achieve majority of the votes, the second choices are accounted for and a true majority winner is shown. This style of voting encourages candidates to agree with each other and discourages the unproductive finger-pointing game seen in modern politics. Political party affiliation is the death of our democracy. Our very own founding fathers and the first ever president stood behind the statement. Alexander Hamilton once called political parties the most fatal disease of popular governments. James Madison, who worked with Hamilton to defend the new Constitution to the public in the Federal Papers, wrote in Federalist 10 that one of the functions of a well-constructed union should be its tendency to break and control the violence of faction. Even the great George Washington warned against political parties, stating that we should avoid them and view ourselves as a cohesive unit. The fathers of our once great democracy knew that our people cannot be united if we are torn apart by political parties. There is no room in our union for a Democratic people and a Republican people, only enough for the American people. How long can our divided nation stand if our very own Pledge of Allegiance states that a divided country will inevitably fall? The thing is, we should not even be driven to ask that question. A promising, well-structured government will provide stability in itself. A reliable government has the people and their interests at the top of its priorities. A corrupt government, however, manipulates and steals from the people for its own interest.